The envelope felt heavy in my hands. Gold embossed, wax sealed, like royalty had summoned me. Inside, cream cardstock announced my brother Elton's engagement dinner. The location made my breath catch. The Bellwether. My restaurant. The one I built from nothing while my family spent 5 years pretending I didn't exist. They chose my place without knowing I owned it. Tonight, they'll sit under chandeliers I selected, taste food from hands they said weren't made for work, and call me poor one last time. Then the waiter will say 2 words that change everything. "Welcome back, chef." I stared at that invitation for a long time before deciding to go. 5 years. 5 years of silence broken only by generic holiday cards that arrived late and birthday texts with no questions attached. "How are you doing, Elra? Where are you living? Did you make it?" They never asked because they never wanted to know the answer. Savannah never forgets who you're supposed to be. In our neighborhood, just south of Forsyth Park, heritage mattered more than happiness. Our family crest hung in the foyer of our historic home like a commandment. Legacy first, feelings later. My parents, Kenneth and Blythe Maddox, wore their lineage like armor at every garden party, every charity gala, every Sunday dinner at the Oglethorpe Club where members traced their roots back to colonial Georgia. My older brother Elton played his role perfectly. Born with the Maddox jawline, the politician's handshake, and a resume built for Ivy League alumni magazines. My sister Marin mastered the art of Southern charm mixed with cruelty by age 13. She could compliment your dress while destroying your confidence in the same breath. They moved through Savannah like they owned it. In many ways, they did. I never figured out where I fit. I wasn't rebellious in the obvious ways. I didn't slam doors or sneak out to meet boys. I just drifted toward the kitchen when no one was watching. That's where I found Inez. She ran our kitchen like a sacred space. Quiet, reverent, everything in its place. She wasn't family by blood, but she was the only one who ever really saw me. When I was 10, she let me dice onions beside her. I cried through every cut, but Inez never told me to stop. "You got steady hands, baby," she said, her voice warm as the bread rising on the counter. The kind that make people feel safe when you cook for them. I started sneaking cookbooks under my pillow, watching old cooking shows like bedtime stories, studying the way chefs moved with purpose and created beauty from raw ingredients. My mother found me piping choux pastry at midnight once. She didn't ask how I learned. She just tightened her silk robe and said, "Maddox's hire chefs, Elra. They don't become them." As if my dreams were a phase, like my brief obsession with horseback riding or violin lessons that never stuck. By 21, I knew I had to leave. The weight of their expectations was crushing every part of me that felt alive. I packed one duffel bag, withdrew the last $2,000 from my college fund, and left a note on the mahogany desk in my father's study. It said simply, "I love you, but I can't be this version of me anymore." They didn't call. They didn't chase me. My mother sent one text 3 days later. "You've made your choice. We hope you'll reconsider when you're ready to be reasonable." I never replied. Now, 5 years later, I stood in my apartment holding their invitation. The easiest choice would have been to throw it away like they'd thrown away my dreams. But something in me resisted. I thought of the girl I was that day I walked out, 25 and terrified, carrying nothing but a suitcase and a voice no one wanted to hear. They called me reckless, ungrateful. My mother clutched her pearls like I'd suggested robbing a bank instead of attending culinary school. Now they were dining under my roof. They'd sip from stemware I selected, taste food born from the hands they said weren't made for work. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about presence. I had earned the right to be in that room whether they knew it or not. I pulled out my black dress. Simple, sharp, the one that said, "I'm not here to impress you because I don't need to anymore." The fabric felt steady against my skin. The mirror showed a woman they wouldn't recognize. That was exactly the point. I stepped out the door and headed toward the Bellwether, toward the family who'd forgotten me, and toward the truth they were about to taste. Those first years nearly broke me. I'm not going to pretend they didn't. Home was a basement room in a crumbling shotgun house on the rough side of Charleston. I shared it with 3 other women and more roaches than I could count. The walls sweated in summer, froze in winter, and the stove clicked ominously even when it was off. But it had a lock and a window that caught morning light. I called that luxury because I had to. I worked anywhere that would take me. Prep cook at a bistro from 5 in the morning until noon, chopping vegetables until my fingers cramped. Line cook downtown from 1 until 10 at night, working the sauté station during brutal dinner rushes. Weekends at a bakery where I burned the same patch of my wrist so many times the skin stopped forming new scars. I kept small notebooks in my apron pocket, filling them with sauce ratios, spice combinations, things I overheard experienced chefs mutter under their breath but never explained. I was exhausted, always. My arms shook unlocking my door most nights, but I was learning. More than that, I was building something that belonged only to me. Everything changed when I met Chef Yvette Leon. She was hosting a pop-up tasting series in New Orleans, and I got hired as a kitchen assistant through a friend of a friend. I thought she'd forget me after that weekend. Instead, she called 3 weeks later. "Your knife work is sloppy," she said by way of greeting. "But your instincts, they're raw and honest. I'd like to see if they can be sharpened." I worked for Chef Yvette for nearly 2 years. She taught me discipline without cruelty, elegance without ego. "We don't chase applause," she'd say while we prepped for service. "We create silence. When guests pause between bites, that held breath, that reverence, that's the applause that matters." She taught me that cooking wasn't about showing off. It was about making people feel something they couldn't name. It was about respect for ingredients, for the hands that grew them, for the people who'd sit at your table trusting you to nourish them. At one of her charity events, I served spring pea risotto with lemon and mint. A man in an expensive suit tried it and asked who made it. I thought he was just another guest fishing for compliments. Turned out James Warren was a venture capital investor with a portfolio in hospitality and a soft spot for food that made him feel something real. "You ever think about running your own place?" he asked, setting down his fork. "Every single day," I answered honestly. He smiled. "Then stop waiting for permission." 6 months later, the Bellwether opened its doors on King Street in Charleston's historic district. The space had been a failed jazz bar before I gutted it. I chose every detail. The reclaimed wood tables, the hand-blown glass chandelier from a local artisan, the weight of the linen napkins, the curve of every chair. I wanted it to feel like walking into someone's home, if that someone had exquisite taste and knew how to make you feel welcome. James believed in me when I had nothing but a concept and a binder full of recipes. He helped me form the LLC, navigate Charleston's complicated permit process, find the right contractor who wouldn't cut corners. He didn't try to control my vision, he just gave me the tools to build it. I kept my name off the press. Every article, every review, every profile, I insisted they focus on the food, not my story. Not out of shame, but because I wanted the work to speak first. I wanted people to taste my food before they knew I came from money and walked away from it, before they knew I was a Maddox who chose cast iron over country clubs. The reviews came slowly, then all at once. A food blogger called us the best-kept secret in Charleston. Bon Appetit sent a writer who stayed for 3 hours. Then the New York Times critic showed up unannounced on a Tuesday night and gave us 4 stars. The review said our food had a quiet confidence that doesn't demand attention but commands it anyway. I framed that review and hung it in my office where no one could see it but me, because I knew what it really meant. I had done it. On my own terms, with my own hands, using skills they said weren't worth developing. I built something beautiful from nothing, and now my family was about to walk through my doors without knowing any of it. I arrived at the Bellwether just after 7. The evening light hit the brick facade the way I always loved, warm and golden. Marcus, my maitre d', stood at the host stand reviewing reservations. When he saw me, he gave the smallest nod. Professional, respectful. Exactly what I needed. Tonight, I wasn't Chef Maddox. I was Elra, the middle child with nothing to prove and no one left to impress. They'd claimed the best table in the house, naturally. Center of the room, directly under the chandelier I'd commissioned. Marin sat with her back straight, diamond earrings catching light. Elton scrolled through his phone. My parents were mid-conversation, probably discussing someone's unfortunate divorce or country club renovation drama. "Elra," my mother said, rising halfway with a practiced air kiss that landed near my cheek. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss your first engagement dinner," I replied, taking the only empty chair. "Second, technically," Marin chimed in with a too-sweet smile. "But who's counting?" My father poured me wine without asking. Cabernet. Not what paired with the opening course, but I said nothing. Marin's eyes traveled over my dress with barely concealed judgment. "You look comfortable." "She's always had a more minimalist style," my mother added, refolding her napkin with unnecessary precision. "Even as a child, remember that awful corduroy phase?" They laughed like I wasn't sitting right there, like I was a fond memory instead of a living person. Celeste, one of my most experienced servers, approached with the amuse-bouche. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second before she placed each delicate bite in front of my family. Compressed watermelon, fermented black garlic, a single microgreen on top. It had taken me 3 months to perfect that bite. 3 months of testing acid balance and texture until it sang. "Well, this is precious," my father muttered, poking it with his fork. "It's called an amuse-bouche," I offered quietly. "I know what it's called," Marin snapped. "I just didn't expect something so conceptual. You know, Elra, you've always had that artsy streak. Never quite practical." "And still unmarried," my mother added lightly, as if it were an observation rather than a verdict on my worth. Elton stayed quiet, but his fiancée Cecily gave me a small apologetic smile. Pity or politeness, I couldn't tell. The next course arrived. Hand-rolled pasta with pea and mint. Marin prodded it like it had personally offended her. "This is it?" she asked. "It seems rather small." My father squinted at the wine list our sommelier had left. "Not a vintage I recognize," he murmured, as if his ignorance was the wine's failure. I said nothing, not yet. My silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was observation. Let them reveal themselves, I thought, before I show them what I've become. "Honestly, Elra," Marin said, reaching for her glass, "I don't know how you afford places like this on a cook's salary." The words hung in the air like smoke. The third course had just been cleared. My mother adjusted her napkin. My father sipped his wine like it was none of his business. Elton said nothing. Cecily looked vaguely horrified. "I manage," I said evenly. Marin smirked. "So what's the secret? Living off credit cards, or are you dating someone with deep pockets?" I took a slow sip of water. "I'm not dating anyone." "Then how exactly do you swing a meal like this?" she pressed. "It's not exactly Olive Garden." The air thickened. Even Celeste paused mid-stride. I glanced at Marcus across the room. Our eyes met briefly. Not yet, I thought. Let them keep going. "I mean, it's fine," Marin continued, lifting her wine glass with false brightness. "We can split your portion if that makes things easier. It wouldn't be the first time we've had to rescue you." Rescue me? From what? A life I actually wanted? When the check arrived, my father did his expected performance, hands raised, forced protest. No, I couldn't possibly." But Marin's husband Bradley was already pulling out his wallet with a self-satisfied smile. "Please," he said, "let me get this one. Consider it my gift to the family." Marcus approached with the black leather folder. Bradley opened it and paused. I watched confusion wash over his face. "Wait, this can't be right," he muttered. "What is it?" Elton asked. "There's only wine on this bill. No food. That's gotta be an error." Marcus stepped forward, calm and precise. "Is there a problem, sir?" "Yes," Bradley said, tapping the paper. "You didn't charge us for the meal." Marcus looked at me. I gave the smallest nod. He turned back to Bradley. "There's no error. The food was taken care of by Chef Maddox." Silence. Complete silence. Then my father blinked. "Chef Maddox?" Marcus smiled faintly and turned to me. "Your usual table is prepared for your investor meeting, Chef. Would you like me to escort them when you're ready?" I set down my glass and looked around the table. All of them. Finally meeting their eyes. Yes, I said calmly. Please close out the beverage tab. The rest is on the house. No one spoke. Marin stared at me like I'd switched languages. Elton looked between Marcus and me like he'd missed something crucial. My father sat frozen, wine glass halfway to his mouth. My mother's hand went to her pearl necklace, gripping it like a lifeline. You own this place? She asked, voice tight. Yes, I'm the executive chef and sole proprietor of the Bellwether. But it's been featured in Bon Appetit, my father said slowly. And the Times. I nodded. Last year, 4 stars. The truth settled over them like heavy snow. They didn't leave immediately. The table sat in awkward silence until my mother reached for her clutch and said too brightly, Well, this has been quite a surprise. Elton stood first. Elra, he said quietly, for what it's worth, this place, it's incredible. I'm sorry I didn't say that sooner. His voice didn't waver. The first time all night, he looked at me without calculation. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. My mother shifted into performance mode. We should do brunch. Something casual. Just family. Catch up properly now that everything's out in the open. Bradley cleared his throat, eager to reclaim authority. If you ever consider expansion, I know people. We could talk capital, franchising models. This restaurant, I interrupted gently, is not your social ladder. He blinked. No one argued. I let the silence sink in before adding, but I'd be happy to host the rehearsal dinner, as my gift. Marin looked up with genuine surprise. You'd do that? You're still my sister, I said, and this place means something to me. If I offer it, it's on my terms. She gave a small nod. Thank you. 2 weeks later, we met for brunch, not at their country club, but at Elma's, a chef-owned spot tucked between a laundromat and a tattoo parlor where the biscuits could make you cry. My mother wrinkled her nose at first, then tasted the sweet potato hash and went quiet. It wasn't perfect, but it was easier. They weren't trying to fix me. I wasn't performing. That afternoon, I met with my mentorship group. 8 young chefs reminded me why I started. Later, Marin texted asking for catering advice. I smiled and replied, Call your sister, she knows someone. That night, I finished my cookbook. The last line came easily. These aren't just recipes. They're proof you can feed yourself with dignity when the world starves you of it. I walked home with nothing left to prove. If this story of reclaiming your worth resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to prove yourself to people who doubted you? Subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience and redemption.
The thing about working for the Department of Homeland Security's Intelligence Division is that your family never really understands what classified means. Not really. To them, it's just a word you use to sound important, to avoid explaining your boring desk job, to make yourself seem more interesting than you actually are. I'm Sarah Mitchell, 31 years old, and I've worked as a senior intelligence analyst for DHS for 6 years. My security clearance level is TS/SCI with special access to counterterrorism intelligence. I analyze threat data, coordinate with international agencies, and help prevent attacks on U.S. soil. But to my family, I'm just Sarah who works for the government doing paperwork. My older sister Amanda is a pediatrician. My younger brother Kyle runs a successful marketing agency. They have careers people understand, careers they can explain at parties, careers that make mom and dad proud. Me. I've spent 6 years saying, I can't discuss my work, so many times that my family genuinely believes I have nothing interesting to discuss. The problem started 3 months ago when I made the mistake of working from home during a family visit. I'd been at my parents' house in suburban Virginia for Mom's birthday weekend. It was supposed to be relaxing, a break from the intensity of my job. But Friday afternoon, my supervisor called with an urgent situation. A credible threat had emerged requiring immediate analysis. I need you to review the intelligence packet and provide assessment within 4 hours, Director Walsh had said. I'm sending it to your secure home system now. Understood, I'd replied, already heading to my childhood bedroom where I'd set up my secure laptop. I have protocols for working remotely. Encrypted laptop, biometric authentication, isolated network connection, physical security measures. My bedroom door had a reinforced lock I'd installed myself. The windows had security film. It was as secure as I could make a civilian location. The intelligence packet was 47 pages of classified threat assessment data. Intercepted communications, surveillance photos, financial tracking, source reports. It detailed a suspected terrorist cell planning an attack on transportation infrastructure. Lives depended on my analysis being accurate and fast. I'd worked for 3 hours straight cross-referencing data, building timeline analysis, identifying pattern connections. I was deep into the work when Mom had knocked on my door. "Sarah, honey, dinner's ready." "I'll be down in an hour, Mom. I'm working." "On a Friday night? Sweetie, you need to relax. It's just work. It can wait." I'd wanted to explain that just work meant preventing people from dying, but I couldn't say that. So I just repeated, "I'll be down when I'm finished. Please don't disturb me." She'd gone away, but I'd heard her talking to Dad downstairs. She's locked herself in her room with her computer again. I don't understand why she can't just take a weekend off. How important can government paperwork possibly be? I'd finished the assessment at 8 p.m., transmitted it through secure channels, and joined the family for late dinner. Amanda had already left to handle a patient emergency. Kyle was showing Mom and Dad his latest marketing campaign on his tablet. "Sarah finally emerges," Dad had said with gentle teasing. "Your brother's been here all weekend without checking his work once. You could learn something from him about work-life balance." "My work has different requirements," I'd said carefully. "Bureaucracy waits for no one, huh?" Kyle had laughed. "I don't miss working for other people. Being your own boss means you control your time." I'd let it go like I always did. They didn't understand that I wasn't checking email or tweaking spreadsheets. I was literally analyzing threats to national security. But I couldn't tell them that, so I just seemed like a workaholic with poor boundaries. The following morning, I'd left my secure laptop in my locked bedroom while I went for a run. Standard protocol. Secure device, locked room, family members who'd been briefed repeatedly about not touching my work materials. I'd been gone 45 minutes. When I'd returned, sweaty and ready for a shower, I'd found my bedroom door open. My heart had dropped into my stomach. I'd rushed inside to find my secure laptop closed on the desk where I'd left it, but my briefcase was open. The printed intelligence packet I'd been working from, which I should have secured in the locked case before leaving, was gone. "Mom." I'd called out, trying to keep the panic from my voice. "Did someone come in my room?" "Oh, honey, yes," Mom had called back from the kitchen. "I needed to grab your laundry. The door was locked, but I used the master key. I didn't touch your computer, don't worry." The master key. The one I'd forgotten existed from when I was a teenager. I'd gone downstairs on shaking legs. Mom, Dad, and Kyle were in the living room. And spread across the coffee table were 47 pages of classified intelligence documents. "Mom," I'd said, voice carefully controlled. "Where did you get those papers?" "From your briefcase, sweetheart. Kyle was asking about your work and I thought it would be nice for you to share for once. You're always so secretive." She'd smiled, completely oblivious. "We've been looking through them. It's actually quite interesting. Although I don't understand most of it." Kyle had been holding a page with surveillance photos. Dad had been reading a threat assessment memo marked top secret //SCI//no foreign in red letters at the top. "These are classified documents," I'd said quietly. "You've just committed a federal crime." Mom had laughed. "Oh, Sarah, don't be so dramatic. It's just your work papers. We're your family." "These documents," I'd continued, pulling out my phone, "are top secret sensitive compartmented information. They detail an active counterterrorism investigation. Unauthorized access is a felony. Unauthorized disclosure could result in people dying." "Sarah, relax," Dad had said, waving dismissively. "We're not going to tell anyone. We were just curious about what you actually do all day." My phone had a panic button, a security feature for exactly this kind of scenario. Unauthorized access to classified materials by uncleared individuals in an unsecured location. I'd pressed it while they were talking. "You need to put those documents down immediately," I'd said. "Do not read another word. Do not touch them. Put them on the table and step away." "Just sharing your boring government work," Mom had said with exasperation. "Nothing important here." Dad had continued scanning the page in his hands, squinting at surveillance photos. Is this in Arabic? Were you translating something? Kyle had his phone out, apparently photographing one of the pages. This is actually pretty cool, Sarah. You're like a real analyst. Why didn't you ever tell us you worked on stuff like this? Because it's classified, I'd said. Kyle, delete that photo right now. It's just for me, he'd protested. I'm not going to post it anywhere. I'd pressed the security alert button on my phone. The emergency response would be immediate, probably 3 to 5 minutes given our proximity to federal facilities in Northern Virginia. Everyone needs to sit down, I'd said. Put down all documents. Put your hands where I can see them. Mom had actually laughed. Sarah Michelle Mitchell, you're being ridiculous. We're your parents. Unauthorized persons have accessed top-secret materials containing intelligence on an active counterterrorism operation, I'd said, now speaking partially for the recording that had activated when I pressed the panic button. 3 individuals present. Location: 2847 Oak Valley Drive, McLean, Virginia. Materials compromised. Full intelligence packet reference number. I'd rattled off the classified designation. Photos have been taken by unauthorized person on personal device. Requesting immediate response team. What are you doing? Kyle had asked, starting to look nervous. Pie job, I'd replied. Which you've just massively complicated. That's when we'd heard the vehicles outside. Multiple vehicles arriving fast. Dad had gone to the window. Sarah, there are black SUVs in our driveway. At least 4 of them. People in tactical gear are getting out. Those would be the Homeland Security response teams, I'd said quietly. You called the police on your own family? Mom's voice had risen in pitch. I activated mandatory security protocols for compromised classified materials. What happens next isn't my choice. It's federal law. The front door had crashed open. They'd breached it rather than knock. 6 armed agents in tactical gear had swept into the living room, weapons drawn. Homeland Security. Everyone on the ground now. Mom had screamed. Dad had frozen. Kyle had dropped his phone and raised his hands. Down on the ground. Hands behind your heads. They'd all complied, lying face down on the carpet as agents secured the room. One agent had moved to me. Agent Mitchell? Yes. 3 unauthorized individuals accessed classified materials from my briefcase. Full intelligence packet on Operation Sandstone. 1 individual photographed documents on personal device. I'd pointed to Kyle's phone on the floor. Secure all electronic devices. Bag all documents. No one touches anything. Another team had swept through the house, checking for additional persons. A 3rd agent had begun photographing the scene. The spread documents on the coffee table, the phones, the briefcase, everything. Sarah, what is happening? Mom had sobbed from the floor. Why are you doing this to us? I'm not doing anything, Mom. You accessed classified materials without authorization. That's a federal crime. These agents are following mandatory response protocols. The lead agent had checked the documents on the table. Jesus Christ. These are current threat assessments? Active operation intel. Yes, sir. I was conducting remote analysis. Materials should have been secured in locked case. That's my failure. But the unauthorized access occurred when my mother used a key to enter my secured room and removed documents from my briefcase without my knowledge or permission. Your mother. The agent had looked at the 3 people on the floor with new understanding. Family members? Yes, sir. They've been briefed repeatedly about not touching my work materials. I had verbally reminded them multiple times this weekend. Did they know the materials were classified? The documents are clearly marked top secret on every page. They were informed these were classified work materials. They chose to access them anyway. Ka had started crying. I didn't know it was this serious. Sarah, please tell them it was just a misunderstanding. You photographed a classified document, I'd said flatly. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a felony. Another agent had emerged from upstairs with my laptop. Secure device appears undisturbed. Biometric lock engaged, no unauthorized access attempts. Thank God, I'd muttered. If they'd tried to access my laptop, this would have been even worse. The lead agent had pulled me aside while his team continued processing the scene. Walk me through exactly what happened. I'd given him the timeline. Working Friday night. Securing laptop but failing to secure printed materials in locked case. Leaving for a run. Returning to find family had accessed my room and removed documents. Finding them reading and photographing classified materials. They're going to be arrested, the agent had said. It wasn't a question. I know. You understand this will destroy your family relationships. I understand. But those documents contain intelligence that could identify sources, compromise operations and get people killed if disclosed. My family doesn't get a pass on that because we share DNA. He'd nodded grimly. You did the right thing. But I'm sorry anyway. They'd taken Mom, Dad and Kyle into custody. Flex cuffs, read them their rights, the full procedure. Mom had been hysterical. Dad had looked at me with betrayal in his eyes. Kyle had kept saying, I'm sorry, I didn't know. But they had known. I told them 100 times not to touch my work materials. They just never believed those materials actually mattered. My sister Amanda had arrived an hour later. She'd been contacted as next of kin. She'd found me sitting in the living room, now a documented crime scene with agents still processing evidence. What the hell happened? Amanda had demanded. Mom called me crying from the police station. She said you had her arrested. She accessed classified intelligence documents, I'd said wearily. So did Dad and Kyle. I followed mandatory security protocols. The rest was inevitable. Over paperwork? Sarah, there are parents. Not paperwork. Active counterterrorism intelligence that could compromise ongoing operations and get people killed if disclosed. And I don't care if there are parents. The law doesn't care either. Amanda had stared at me. You've lost your mind. You're going to let our mother go to prison over your stupid job. It's not my choice, Amanda. They committed federal crimes. The moment they accessed those documents, the outcome was determined. I reported it as required by law. Everything after that is out of my hands. You could have not reported it. Then I would have committed a felony, failure to report a security breach. I would have lost my clearance, my career and probably faced criminal charges myself. And if that intelligence had been further compromised, people might have died. Is that what you wanted me to do? She'd looked at me like I was a stranger. I wanted you to protect your family. I am protecting my family, I'd said quietly. And about 330 million other people who live in this country. Your family isn't more important than national security. No one's family is. Amanda had left without another word. The investigation had taken 3 weeks. Mom, Dad and Kyle were released on bond but faced serious federal charges. Unauthorized access to classified materials, unauthorized disclosure and in Kyle's case, unauthorized reproduction of classified documents. Their lawyer, a former federal prosecutor who understood exactly how screwed they were, had negotiated plea agreements. Mom and Dad pleaded guilty to misdemeanor unauthorized access with 2 years probation, $50,000 fines each and mandatory security training. Kyle, because he'd photographed documents, faced felony charges. He pleaded guilty to 1 count in exchange for 18 months in federal prison followed by 3 years supervised release. My family was destroyed. The legal fees alone would bankrupt my parents. Kyle's marketing business collapsed. Who wants to hire a convicted felon who photographed classified government documents? His wife had filed for divorce. Amanda refused to speak to me. Extended family took sides, most of them against me. I was disinvited from family gatherings, removed from family group chats, treated like I'd committed some unforgivable betrayal. And maybe I had from their perspective. But from my perspective, they'd committed an unforgivable betrayal first. They'd been told repeatedly not to touch my work materials. They'd been warned that my work was classified and serious. They'd chosen to disregard all of that because they didn't believe what I did actually mattered. They'd been wrong. 4 months after the incident, I sat in Director Walsh's office for a security review. Your family situation has been thoroughly investigated, she said, reviewing the file. We've concluded you followed all proper protocols. In fact, your response to the breach was exemplary. Thank you, ma'am. However, your home environment has been deemed insecure for remote work. Future assignments requiring classified materials will need to be conducted in secure facilities only. I understand. She'd closed the file and looked at me directly. How are you holding up? Honestly, ma'am, not great. But I'd make the same choices again. Good. Because that's the only right answer. National security can't be compromised for personal relationships. The moment you put family loyalty above operational security, you become a liability. Yes, ma'am. For what it's worth, Mitchell, I'm sorry. I know this cost you everything. But you saved an operation that was already on a knife's edge. The intelligence your family accessed included source identification data. If that had been disclosed, we would have lost critical assets in a hostile region. People would have died. They still don't understand that, I'd said quietly. They think I chose paperwork over family. They'll probably never understand. Most people can't conceptualize what we actually do because we work in the shadows. We prevent disasters that never happen. There are no headlines for attacks we stop, no credit for lives we save. Your family will probably always see you as the person who destroyed their lives over nothing. I know. Can you live with that? I'd thought about it. Really thought about it. Yes, I'd finally said. As I know the truth. And I know that intelligence packet contained information that would have compromised 8 human sources, 3 ongoing operations, and potentially revealed intelligence gathering methods to hostile actors. My family's comfort isn't worth that price. Nobody's is. Director Walsh had smiled slightly. You're going to go far in this agency, Mitchell. Unfortunately, you're also going to be very lonely. She'd been right on both counts. 6 months after the incident, I was promoted to lead intelligence analyst with a 22% pay increase and expanded operational authority. I was working on high-level threat assessments, briefing senior officials, coordinating with international partners. My career had never been better. My personal life was destroyed. Mom sent a letter from her court-mandated security training. It was full of hurt and confusion, asking why I'd done this to them, saying she'd only wanted to understand my work, that she was my mother and deserved to know what her daughter did all day. She still didn't get it. Dad wouldn't communicate at all. Amanda sent one email. I hope your job was worth it. You've lost your family. Kyle wrote from federal prison. Unlike the others, his letter showed some understanding. Sarah, I'm not going to say I forgive you because I'm still angry. My life is ruined. But I get it now. They made us sit through classes about classified information and why it matters. I understand what could have happened if I'd posted that photo online like I almost did. I understand people could have died. I'm still angry that you didn't warn me better, didn't make me understand. But I also know I should have listened when you told me not to touch your stuff. I just never thought it was actually important. I'm sorry, Kyle. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd received. I wrote back carefully. All prison correspondence was monitored. I told him I was sorry too, that I wish things had gone differently, that I hoped he'd rebuild his life when he got out. I didn't tell him that I'd do it all again if I had to. As I would. The operation I'd been analyzing, Operation Sandstone, successfully interdicted a terrorist cell planning coordinated attacks on subway systems in 3 major cities. 47 people were arrested. Hundreds, possibly thousands of lives were saved. My family would never know that. The operation was classified. The success would never make headlines. The people whose lives were saved would never know how close they'd come to dying. But I knew. And that knowledge had to be enough. A year after the incident, I attended Kyle's release from federal prison. Amanda was there, still not speaking to me. Mom and Dad came but sat on the opposite side of the room. Kyle looked older, worn down. Prison had been hard on him. But he hugged me when we met outside. Thank you for coming, he'd said quietly. You're still my brother. Even after everything? Even after everything. We talked for a while. Carefully neutral conversation about his plans, his job prospects, his hopes for rebuilding. He'd asked about my work. I'd said, I can't discuss it, like always, but this time he just nodded. I get it now, he'd said. Took prison for me to understand, but I get it. Mom had approached as we were talking. She looked at me with eyes full of pain. Was it worth it? She'd asked. Destroying your family over your job? I'd thought about Operation Sandstone. About the subway cars that weren't bombed. About the people who went home to their families that day without ever knowing they'd been in danger. Yes, I'd said quietly. It was worth it. She'd walked away. Maybe for the last time. Dad had stopped as he passed. I don't understand you anymore, Sarah. I don't know if I ever did. I know, I'd replied. And I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry for doing my job. He'd left without another word. Amanda had been the last to go. She'd paused near my car. Do you ever regret it? She'd asked. Every day, I'd admitted. But I'd still make the same choice. Then you're not the sister I grew up with. No, I'd agreed. I'm not. I'm someone who takes her oath seriously. Someone who understands that protecting people sometimes means making choices that destroy your own life. You save lives every day as a doctor. You understand sacrifice. Not like this. Not turning on your own family. They turned first, I'd said quietly. When they decided my work didn't matter enough to respect basic boundaries. When they chose curiosity over my repeated warnings. They made their choices. I just dealt with the consequences. She'd driven away without responding. I'd stood in that parking lot for a long time, watching my broken family disappear in different directions, knowing I'd been the one to shatter us. But I'd also stood there knowing that somewhere, people were alive because I'd done my job. Because I'd prioritized national security over family comfort. Because I'd made the hard choice when it mattered. 2 years later, I received the intelligence community's Exceptional Service Medal. The citation was classified. I couldn't tell anyone what it was for. But Director Walsh had shaken my hand at the private ceremony. Your work on Operation Sandstone and subsequent operations has been extraordinary, she'd said. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity this agency needs. Thank you, ma'am. I know what it cost you. I'm sorry it had to cost that much. It is what it is. She'd looked at me thoughtfully. You know, Mitchell, most people in your situation would have let their family off with a warning. Secured the documents, given them a stern lecture, never reported the breach. It would have been easier. Safer for your career, honestly. And wrong, I'd said. The protocols exist for a reason. I don't get to ignore them because enforcement is inconvenient. Exactly. And that's why you're receiving this medal. Because integrity means doing the right thing even when it destroys you. The medal sat in my apartment now in a locked case that required biometric access. Like everything else in my life, it was something I couldn't share, couldn't explain, couldn't use to help people understand who I was or what I'd sacrificed. My family still didn't speak to me. They probably never would. But somewhere out there hundreds of people were alive because I'd stopped an attack they'd never know about. Because I'd protected intelligence that kept sources safe and operations secure. Because I'd chosen duty over family when it mattered most. That had to be enough. It was all I had left. And standing in my secure apartment, looking at that classified medal representing sacrifices no one could know about, I realized something. I'd do it all again. Every painful choice. Every family relationship destroyed. Every lonely holiday and missed birthday and cold shoulder from people I loved. I'd do it all again because that's what the oath meant. That's what service meant. And some things, national security, operational integrity, the lives of people who would never know I existed, were worth more than my family's forgiveness. Even if that truth left me completely alone. It was enough. It had to be enough.